Welcome back to Lord of the Mysteries, where secrets are thicker than your ex's drama and the plot twists hit harder than that last shot of tequila. Get ready to dive into chapters 51 to 60, where things get so wild, you'll need a seatbelt and maybe a safe word. Before we get lost in this chaos, hit that subscribe button like you're ghosting your ex, fast and with zero regrets. And while you're at it, smack the like button harder than Klein slapping reality with his mystic powers. Let's get into this madness. Chapter 51, The Grounded Ritualistic Magic. Using magic to settle an IOU? Is he trying to curse his debtor to death or create counterfeit notes? I might not have a solution to the problem, but I can finish you instead? All sorts of thoughts bounced around in Klein's mind as he looked at old Neil with a raised eyebrow. Seriously, how do you even get roped into magic debt collection? He seriously considered the possibility of calling the cops. No, wait. Maybe he should inform the Nighthawks. Old Neil shot a glance at him and said, peeved, I can see ignorance, foolishness, and that weak, shameless disbelief in your eyes. Didn't Dunn tell you the maxim of the mystery priors? Do as you wish, but do no harm. Though this maxim originated from the secret and evil Moses ascetic order, Beyonders who choose the path of the Moses ascetic order have proven its validity through their own chaotic adventures. As long as one abides by it and shows the necessary fear and reverence, the risk of losing control will be minimized. The opposite, however, is a whole different level of hell. Your suspicion towards me is an insult to mystery priors. Sorry. Klein did not hesitate to apologize, a bit too eager to diffuse the situation. He had indeed forgotten that Dunn Smith had once mentioned the maxim. Old Neil wasn't truly angry. In a blink of an eye, he chuckled. A pity. Very few Beyonders choose to be seers. There's no corresponding maxim to help you avoid disaster. But I have Emperor Roselle's diaries. Yes, strictly abiding by the maxim has a hint of acting. Klein suddenly thought, nodding as if deep in thought like a philosopher pondering life's mysteries, or just wondering where his last snack went. Old Neil didn't continue. He removed the vases and other items from the round table and tossed them into a corner like an impatient host at a party. Then, he whipped out both a crimson red and black candle from the silver chest. If ordinary folks attempt ritualistic magic, they have to follow the results from astromancy or read corresponding manuals. They have to choose suitable dates and times. For example, the day representing the goddess, the period when she rules over the moon. But for us Beyonders, especially those of us who are practically magic ninjas in this domain, there's no need for that. Our acute spiritual perception and potent astral projections are the real MVPs. Of course, if you're feeling iffy about the ritualistic magic you're attempting, it's best to choose a suitable date and time. It can increase the probability of success. Not that you'll win the lottery, but odds and ends. Ah, right. This is based on a premise. Remember carefully to abide strictly by the rules. Old Neil placed the two candles on the table like an artist setting up for a masterpiece and turned to Klein, saying very solemnly, low-sequence Beyonders aren't strong enough. Almost all the ritualistic magic they can perform involves begging for external powers and help. Therefore, you can only consider orthodox divinities like the goddess or the Lord of Storms. Absolutely do not attempt to communicate with the unknown or unpredictable existences, even if people believe in them or the promises recorded are filled with enticing BS. Believe me, don't take any chances. Attempting this once will send you sliding down a slippery slope into the abyss with no return ticket. Any effort to resist will just slow down your descent. Kind of like trying to stop a speeding train with your bare hands. Good luck with that. I'll remember, Klein said in a deep voice. However, he felt a bit nervous. My luck enhancement ritual has apparently sought power from an unknown and unpredictable existence. Furthermore, I've gained powers capable of pulling people into the fog that even a senior Beyonder like the Hanged Man finds unbelievable. Well, at least I think he is a senior Beyonder. Thankfully, I haven't gone mad or shown any signs of losing control yet. While worrying over this, he proactively changed the subject. So, Nighthawks should seek the help of the goddess? No one will stop you if you pray to the Lord of Storms. However, we're unable to tell from our ritualistic magic whether he replies with malicious intent or not. The outcome could very well turn into a dumpster fire of unpredictability. Old Neil made Klein give up the idea with a laugh. There was no so-called best, only necessary. After his exhortations, Old Neil picked up the crimson red candle and said, "By using candles made of moonflowers and dark red sandalwood, we'll represent the goddess's identity as Lady of Crimson in the ritualistic magic." He pointed to the black candle and said, "Candles made of night vanilla and slumber flowers represent the night, for ambiance." As he spoke, he placed the black candle on the top left end of the round table, while the red candle went on the top right end. Why do we symbolize the goddess with only two candles? She is also the mistress of calm and silence, empress of disaster and horror, and mistress of calm and silence. Wait, did I just repeat myself? Guess I'm talking too much. Old Neil chuckled. That's right. This is something I wished you asked. Before their fall, the Moses ascetic order had a fantastic relationship with the church. Their beliefs and results in ritualistic magic have heavily influenced us. They believe that all objects are numeric. Every number has a spirituality, and in ritualistic magic, 0 represents the unknown or chaos. It symbolizes the state of the universe before it was born. 1 represents a beginning, the first creator. 2 represents the world and various divinities that were produced from his body. 3 represents contact between divinities and material objects to create all things. Here, using 2 candles represents the goddess, while the third candle is for you. 3 begets all things? All things stem from 3? Klein couldn't help but recall certain things from his previous life, like how to make a decent sandwich. Seeing Klein listen attentively, Old Neil took a third candle and said, "This is the candle representing me. It's a very ordinary candle, which only has a little mint added. Just a little spritz for that fresh scent. Take note that plants like roses, lemons, mint, moonflower, night vanilla, and slumber flower are beloved and cherished by the goddess." Viewing it from another angle, the 3 candles represent the bodies, spiritualities, and godhood of every person. Kind of like a cosmic trinity, but with better lighting. After finishing the description, Old Neil placed the third candle in the middle of the round table, like the cherry on top of this magical sundae. He then took out a bottle of concocted full moon essence oil, a huge cauldron engraved with the dark sacred emblem, a silver knife with gorgeous patterns, a cup of water, and a saucer of coarse salt. To beyonders who aren't great at ritualistic magic, there's a need for bells, crystal balls, silver cups. Here's the adjusted version of Chapter 51, complete with adult humor and slang while maintaining the original content. Chapter 51, The Grounded Ritualistic Magic. Using magic to settle an IOU? Is he trying to curse his debtor to death or create counterfeit notes? I might not have a solution to the problem, but I can finish you instead? All sorts of thoughts bounced around in Klein's mind as he looked at Old Neil with a raised eyebrow. Seriously, in the name of the Evernight goddess, the Lady of Crimson, you have been sanctified. After a short but powerful syllable, Old Neil drew a silver knife and inserted it into a cup of clear water. Then he raised it and pointed to the space beyond the round table. He aimed the blade tip in the periphery and took a step forward, circling the round table. Every step he took made Klein feel an invisible energy spew out of the silver knife. It was filled with spirituality as it connected with the air, forming a completely sealed wall. After walking one round, the altar was completely isolated from its surroundings. Old Neil stood in front of the round table and put the silver knife down. He picked up the bottle of full moon essence oil and dripped 3 drops on the black, dark red, and ordinary candles. Sizzle! A thin mist emanated as everything seemed to become veiled in mystery. Old Neil put down the glass bottle and looked at the fake goatskin parchment silently for 2 minutes. Then he picked up the quill and drew a mark he controlled, a square that framed all the content, indicating that he was in control of the debt. Following that, he drew another cross, indicating that it was canceled. Upon reaching this step, he picked up the parchment with one hand and tapped his glabella with the other to activate his spirit vision. Another invisible and exuberant energy bloomed as Old Neil whispered a chant. I pray for the power of the Dark Night. I pray for the power of the Crimson. I pray for the goddess's loving grace. Please provide me with the funds to pay this IOU. Night Vanilla, an herb that belongs to the Red Moon, please bestow your powers to my incantation. Moonflower, an herb that belongs to the red moon. Please bestow your powers to my incantation." Klein was completely flabbergasted listening from the side. All sorts of thoughts arose in him. Such an incantation can work? Although it was recited from written Hermes, isn't this way too simple and down to earth? Wouldn't the goddess be angry and multiply the debt severalfold? At that moment, the candlelight lit up suddenly. After old Neil finished his incantation, he closed his eyes for 2 minutes. He picked up the full moon essence oil and dripped one drop onto each of the 3 candles. Immediately following that, he grabbed the parchment and pulled it close to the candle representing me. When it ignited, he immediately threw it into the cauldron. Old Neil closed his eyes again as he seemed to sense the burning of the IOU. He opened his eyes after a moment and looked toward the black sacred emblem on the cauldron. The parchment was already completely incinerated. Praise the lady! Old Neil tapped his chest in 4 spots, forming the shape of the crimson moon. Then he extinguished the candles in the opposite order as he lit them. After finishing everything, he used the silver knife to rip apart the invisible wall around him. A huge wind stirred immediately as old Neil heaved a sigh of relief. It's done. That's it? Klein asked in a daze. Has the IOU been settled? How? I don't know either. Anyways, it will be settled in a reasonable manner, said old Neil with a smile as he threw up his hands. This? Klein was unsure what expression or words to use as a response. Isn't this a little unreliable? Chapter 52, Spectator. Stop thinking about the bloody IOU. Let's discuss the ritualistic magic. Old Neil packed up the candles, cauldron, silver knife, and other occult goodies, looking more relaxed than someone who owes 30 pounds should. Klein wanted to shrug like the Americans in his previous life, but let's face it, that wasn't very gentlemanly. Not in this world, anyway. He switched focus to the lesson on ritualistic magic and bombarded old Neil with questions. Like, why the heck do incantations sound like something out of a gothic rap battle? But Klein learned that as long as the format was respected and the important stuff was said in Hermes, you could get a little creative. Just don't get too creative. Blasphemy and sass weren't part of the spell. The class dragged on until noon, when old Neil coughed twice, signaling it was time to call it quits. We have to head back to Zootaland Street, he grumbled, and to get these bloody materials, I missed my beloved breakfast. Klein looked around, amused yet confused. Mr. Neil, do you have a chef or a maidservant to do the cooking? If a man was making 12 pounds a week, hiring a couple of people to do the grunt work wouldn't be that hard, right? Except, Klein quickly remembered Neil's 30-pound debt. Yeah, that's enough to keep anyone in ramen noodles and water. As Klein kicked himself for asking a dumb question, old Neil shook his head with 0 thoughts to give. I experiment with ritualistic magic at home, research weird objects, and dig into old tomes. Hiring ordinary folks as a chef or maid? Ha! They'd probably bolt the moment I start chanting over the cauldron. I only get someone to clean once in a while. But if they weren't ordinary, do you think they'd clean houses? Klein awkwardly chuckled. Yeah, probably a silly question. It's not like I'm going to be summoning spirits over my breakfast table anytime soon. Old Neil stood up, donned his round felt hat, and headed out the door, muttering to himself, I smell foie gras. Once I've paid off that damn IOU, I'm getting myself a feast. For lunch, I'm having roast pork with apple glaze and definitely some sausages with mashed potatoes. Dude, you're making me hungry. Klein thought as he swallowed the saliva pooling in his mouth. They headed to the nearest public carriage stop. After hopping off at Zootaland Street, old Neil suddenly stiffened like he'd just seen a ghost. What do I see? Goddess, what am I seeing? The old man moved faster than a teen hyped up on energy drinks, darting to the roadside and snatching up something with excitement. Klein, ever the curious one, leaned in. It was a wallet, well-made, dark brown leather, probably buffalo or sheepskin. Klein noticed the light blue logo on the side, a white dove spreading its wings ready to take flight. But what really caught his eye? The bulging stack of paper notes inside. Old Neil opened it, revealing a hefty bundle of 10-pound notes, 30 of them. Old Neil's eyes twinkled. There's 30 10-pound notes plus a few 5s, 1s, and soli. That's over 300 pounds. 300 pounds! Klein's breath hitched. That was more money than he could dream of seeing in 10 years, let alone all at once. I wonder which poor soul dropped it. No regular Joe carries this kind of cash, Klein muttered, trying to sound calm but inwardly freaking out. Old Neil, however, chuckled like the universe had just handed him a divine gift. Doesn't matter who dropped it. We didn't steal it. We'll just wait here. They'll come back for it soon enough. Nobody's walking away from that much cash. Klein sighed in relief, mentally upgrading old Neil's moral compass. Sure enough, less than a minute later, a fancy four-wheeled carriage sped over. It bore the same light blue Dove logo. A butler stepped out, looking as polished as the carriage. He doffed his hat and politely addressed them. Sirs, I believe that belongs to my master. Old Neil nodded, but played it cool. I need to verify that. Might I ask how much money was inside? The butler hesitated. As a mere servant, I don't know the exact amount. Allow me to consult my master. A quick exchange through the carriage window followed, and the butler returned with a smile. Over 300 pounds, but less than 350. My master isn't sure of the exact total. Must be nice to be so filthy rich, you lose track of how many hundreds you're carrying, Klein thought with an envious sigh. Old Neil handed back the wallet. With the goddess as my witness, it's yours. The butler, clearly grateful, pulled out 3 10-pound notes. Sir Deweyville wishes to commend your honesty. Please accept this token of appreciation. Klein's brain clicked. Sir Deweyville. The guy who ran Deweyville Trust and rented cheap apartments to the working class? Yeah, his brother had mentioned the man, but with skepticism. Thank you, Sir Deweyville. He's a generous gentleman, old Neil said as he pocketed the money without a second thought. As soon as the carriage rolled away, old Neil turned to Klein with a grin and waved the notes. 30 pounds. Debt settled. Klein gawked. That's some seriously convenient magic. Old Neil gave him a wink. That's the power of magic, my friend. Power of magic. Yeah, right? Sure, Klein thought as they made their way to the security office. A little later, Klein couldn't help but ask, Mr. Neil, why didn't you ask for more? Old Neil grinned. One word, greed. Magic and greed don't mix, my boy. Temperance. That's the key to living long in this business. In a huge ballroom, candles were burning on a few chandeliers, emitting a fragrance that soothed the minds of people. By the sheer number of candles, they produced a light in no way inferior to that of gas lamps. There were long tables with pan-fried foie gras, grilled steak, roasted chicken, fried tonguefish, desi oysters, mutton stew, cream soup, and other delicacies. In addition, there were bottles of mist champagne, Ormir grape wine, and Southville red wine. They were all glistening with a tempting glow under the light. Servants in red vests carried trays with crystal cups and shuttled between the gentlemen and ladies dressed both elegantly or gorgeously. Audrey Hall was wearing a collared, high-waisted, pale white dress with engageantes. Her corset was tightly fitted, while her voluminous layers were puffed up perfectly with a cage crinoline. Her long blonde hair was coiled up in an elegant bun, and the earrings, necklace, and rings she wore sparkled brightly. At her feet were a pair of white dancing shoes that were stitched with roses and diamonds. How many petticoats am I even wearing? 5? 6? Wearing white silk gloves, Audrey caressed her crinoline gently with her right hand. Her left hand was holding a glass of clear champagne. Audrey was nothing like her usual self, usually placing herself center stage of banquets and making her the focus of attention. Instead, she avoided the bustle and quietly stood in the shadows of hanging curtains by the French windows. She took a sip of champagne as she watched the crowd as though she did not belong. Count Wolf's youngest son is chatting with Viscount Conrad's daughter. He likes to move his forearm to reinforce what he says. The bigger the movement of his forearm, the more unbelievable his words. That is something gleaned from experience. He can't stop trying to elevate himself by putting other people down. However, he can't help but feel guilty. It can be seen by the way he talks and his body language. Duchess Della has repeatedly covered her mouth while laughing with her left hand today. Ah, I see. She is showing off her pure ocean blue sapphire. Her husband, Duke Negan, is discussing the current situation with a few conservative nobles. Since the banquet began, he has searched for Duchess Della once. They almost never make eye contact. Maybe they aren't as in love as they pretend to be. Baron Larry has made Madame Parnas laugh 7 times. That's very normal, nothing strange about it. But why does she look at her husband with guilty eyes? Oh, they have gone their separate ways. That's not right. The directions they are headed lead to the garden. In the extravagant banquet, Audrey saw many details she never noticed in the past. There was an instant where she nearly believed that she was watching an opera. Everyone is a good opera actor. She sighed silently as her eyes remained limpid. At that moment, she suddenly sensed something and turned her head. She cast her gaze onto a dark corner in the large balcony outside. In the shadows was a huge golden retriever sitting there silently. She was looking inside at Audrey while half her body was hidden in the darkness. Susie. The corners of Audrey's mouth twitched as her expression instantly changed. She could no longer maintain her state as a spectator. Chapter 53, Listener. An ancient three-masted sailboat was navigating through a tumultuous storm at sea. The whole thing looked like a damn nightmare. If you were there, you'd be kissing your insurance goodbye. The ship wasn't fast, and let's just say its displacement game was lacking. With the sea and sky looking like they were in a full-on breakup fight, the sailboat resembled a sad, withered leaf, the kind that gets stomped on by some random kid. But miraculously, no matter how the typhoon threw a tantrum or how the waves decided to audition for a disaster movie, the sailboat stayed chill, sailing without so much as a wobble. Alger Wilson stood on the empty deck, staring at waves that seemed like they were trying to high-five the heavens. Whatever he was thinking, it was clearly deep, probably about how much he hated Mondays. "It's going to be Monday again," he muttered, like every 9-to-5 worker ever. But for Alger, Monday didn't just mean crappy coffee and endless meetings. Nope, it meant something different. It was the day belonging to some mysterious force, forever surrounded by grayish-white fog. Sounds like the kind of thing you'd get into after too many conspiracy documentaries. At least I haven't gone batshit crazy yet. Alger chuckled to himself, throwing in some top-tier self-deprecation. Ain't that the dream? One of the few sailors leaned over like an overeager intern, reverently asking, "Your Grace, where are we heading this time?" Alger surveyed the stormy surroundings, giving off some serious boss mode vibes. "Pursue the listener from the Aurora Order?" he said coolly. The storm finally called it a day, and a mist began to rise. On a weird sailboat, armed with cannons like it had something to prove. An 8- or 9-year-old boy with soft yellow hair looked around at the rowdy pirates with wide, terrified eyes. The pirates were acting like they were at a frat party. Some chugged beer from barrels, others swung from ropes, some were busy trash-talking, and a couple were straight up brawling like it was free-for-all night. The boy, Jack, turned his scared little face towards a black-robed man lurking in the shadows. Honestly, the guy could have starred in a horror movie with that getup, and whispered, "Father, where are we going?" 5 days ago was the first time Jack had ever seen his dad, a man who called himself an adventurer. Yeah, right. Jack thought the whole adventuring was just a fancy way of saying part-time deadbeat. If not for the oil painting his late mother left behind, confirming that this guy was, in fact, his father. And because the orphanage practically kicked him out, Jack wouldn't have followed this stranger anywhere, especially not on a pirate booze cruise. The man in the shadows, with a jawline sharper than a new kitchen knife, finally looked down at his son, giving him a weirdly warm smile. "Jack, I'm taking you to a holy place, a residence where the Creator once lived." "Oh, so we're off to the kingdom of God or something? Great, I didn't even pack my fancy robes," Jack said, half sarcastic but mostly scared. Standing in the shadows, Jack's dad looked like a statue chiseled by some artisan with way too much time on his hands. He placed a hand to his ear, striking a dramatic pose like he was listening to a hot gossip. He replied in a creepy, sleep-talking tone. "Jack, mortals are a lie. The Creator made this world and now exists in everything, like that leftover pizza you forgot in the fridge. Yup, God's in that too." Jack, feeling like his brain had just taken a vacation, couldn't make sense of his dad's ramblings, so he shook his head and decided to ask another question he'd been dying to know. "Father, if the Creator doesn't exist anymore, why are we headed to his old house?" It sounds like showing up uninvited to a dead guy's place. His father's expression froze for a second, as if Jack had just asked him for his Netflix password. Then, suddenly, he doubled over, knees hitting the deck. Black shards started popping out of his skin like some kind of nightmare pimple. He grabbed his head, screaming in agony, "They're lying! They're all lying!" Well, that escalated quickly. After lunch, Klein slowly returned to the Blackthorn Security Company, still buzzing from old Neil's promise to take him to the underground market. Honestly, that was way more exciting than any corporate perks Klein had ever heard of. Just as he was deciding whether to dive into the boring task of reading documents or flex his seer skills, Captain Dunn walked in, looking all serious in his usual black windbreaker and hat combo. This guy could give Batman a run for his money with that outfit. Captain, any news? Klein asked, half expecting something about the Antigonus family's notebook. It was always about that damn notebook. The facts have been corroborated, Dunn replied. Ray Bieber has the Antigonus family's notebook, but he's gone full Houdini on us. Vanished. Klein sighed internally. Why couldn't things ever be simple? Like, could they not just get a phone, fax machine, or better yet, Wi-Fi? They were really missing out on surveillance surveillance and big data. But nope, here they were, still sending freaking telegrams. But hey, Dunn continued, we found the notebook, and that's thanks to you. I've sent a telegram to the Backlund Diocese, and they're sending over sealed artifact 2.049. It's dangerous, but it'll tell us if Bieber is really a descendant of the Antigonus family. And so the chapter continues with Klein realizing his choices and responsibilities as a seer, all while navigating the bizarre world of Beyonders and their mysterious powers. Whether it's dodging danger or mastering his shooting skills, one thing's for sure, Klein's adventure is only getting started. But regardless, we can consider ourselves as having found the notebook. And this is all thanks to you. Of course, it still needs another round of confirmations. I have already sent a telegram to the Backlund Diocese, requesting them to escort sealed artifact 2049 here. It was once a dangerous item of the Antigonus family. It can help us know if Ray Bieber is a descendant of the Antigonus family. A grade 2 sealed artifact. Dangerous. They can be used with care and moderation. Klein had originally wanted to ask about the sealed artifact, its special abilities, and the danger it posed out of curiosity, but he instantly recalled that he lacked the necessary clearance. He had no choice but to give up. May Goddess bless us. Klein tapped 4 spots on his chest, forming the sign of the full moon. Dunn pushed open the door to his office and said with a slight nod, "The goddess has always been protecting us. Klein, if you had not chosen Seer, you would be a formal member after this matter is verified. You could have chosen Sleepless, but pity. To be frank, I'm still puzzled over your choice. Although Corpse Collector is quite off-putting, you have seen daily as well. You should know that spirit mediums vary in strength. As for Mystery Priors, they're a good choice too. At the very least, you have old Neil as a role model, so he will make sure the risk of losing control is minimized." With regards to this question, Klein had prepared an answer from the beginning. He just never had a chance to use it since Dunn did not ask. He was only able to answer in passing. He organized his words and said, "My considerations stem from the fact that Seers and Mystery Priors are considered Beyonders with a support role. They do not need to always face enemies, for that's too dangerous. And both you and old Neil said that in the domain of mystery and Beyonders, curiosity and experimentation usually bring about terrifying outcomes. Describing Mystery Priors as prying mysteries made me worried. So, as you know, I was only an ordinary graduate not long ago. A lack of guts is the only reason I made such a choice. I have to say that this is a very reasonable answer that goes beyond my expectations." Dunn massaged his temples and chuckled. He turned halfway as his gray eyes sized up Klein. "Continue going out for now. Do not limit yourself to the paths leading from Welch's Place to Iron Cross Street. Perhaps you might sense the notebook and help us confirm Ray Bieber's location." All right. Klein realized that he no longer needed to be in a dilemma. He bade Dunn farewell and turned around, his heart beginning to count. 3, 2. "Hold on," shouted Dunn. Klein turned his head and smiled. "Captain, is there anything else?" Dunn coughed slightly and said, "Well, support Beyonders have to fight their enemies from time to time. Although Seers sound like they can avoid such battles, they are not to be ignored. You have to maintain your shooting skills and work on increasing your strength. This is what I'm working hard towards." Klein pointed outside. "I'll be leaving." "All right. Wait a moment." Dunn shouted for him once more. As he pondered, he said, Perhaps I have to consider hiring a combat trainer for you. Of course, this matter is under the premise that you become a formal member. Klein responded tersely before asking carefully, Captain, is there anything else? No. Seeing Klein's unbelieving eyes, Dunn shook his head and smiled. He emphasized again, really, nothing. Only then did Klein walk past the partition divider. He bade farewell to Roseanne and Mrs. Oriana and headed to the shooting club for practice. With all of this done, he went to the Divination Club and saw the beautiful Angelica standing there reading newspapers leisurely. Home, Klein silently read. With the cane in hand, he walked over and greeted with a smile. Good afternoon, Madame Angelica. Good afternoon, Mr. Moretti. In no rush, Angelica put down her magazine. She stood up and said, Not long after you left yesterday, Mr. Glassies came. He just recovered from a major illness. Klein heaved a sigh of relief as he smiled. That sure is something worth celebrating. Upon hearing this, Angelica, who was secretly observing him, lowered her voice and asked out of curiosity, Mr. Glassies said that you are a very, very, very magical doctor. And are you? What? Klein looked at the lady in front of him, suspecting if he was hearing things. What made him think I'm a doctor? Even I do not know. Chapter 54. The First Divination Requester. Upon seeing Klein's odd expression, Angelica immediately felt her confidence waver, like when you realize your last text was left on read for hours. Is that so? Mr. Glassies mentioned that you were able to tell about an ailment in his lungs just from observation. Her voice trailed off like someone trying to backpedal after overselling a used car. Klein chuckled. I think Mr. Glassies might have misunderstood. He was about to brush it off, but after remembering yesterday's absolute no-show of clients, like a party nobody RSVP'd to, he decided to explain. Actually, it's a form of divination. Angelica blinked, clearly not buying it. Divination? But Mr. Glassies said you just looked at his face? That counts as divination? With a smile, Klein stayed calm, like a poker player sitting on a royal flush. As a member of the Divination Club, you've heard of palm reading, right? She nodded slowly. Sure, but you didn't read his palm. Were you secretly checking him out? Klein cooked up a quick lie. Face reading. It's not so different from palm reading, fundamentally. Really? Angelica's skepticism was all over her face. To keep his seer act going, Klein tapped his glabella twice, activating his spirit vision. He studied Angelica's aura. Purple head, red limbs, and a blue throat. Her health seemed fine, just some dull spots, probably from the grind of everyday life. When he zoomed in on her emotions, he spotted a wild mix of orange, red, and blue. In other words, she was feeling warm, excited, and maybe thinking too much. Basically the emotional equivalent of standing at a bar after 3 tequila shots. Klein was ready to deactivate his spirit vision when he noticed a rich darkness hidden deep in her emotions. Also, she lacked a little white, like someone desperately in need of a self-help book or a gym membership. Were you reading my face just now? Angelica asked, half worried, half curious, as she noticed Klein looking way too serious for comfort. Klein didn't answer immediately. He just tapped his glabella and kept his face like, yeah, I'm in the zone. Finally, after making her squirm a bit, he spoke warmly. Madam Angelica, there are some sorrows and pains you shouldn't keep locked up. You gotta let that stuff out. Angelica's eyes widened. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out, like when someone is trying to respond to a surprise breakup. Klein continued in his best therapist voice. You should go hiking, play some tennis, or get into a tragic play. Cry, scream, sweat it all out. Let those tears flow, girl. Angelica turned to stone. She stood there, totally stunned, trying hard to blink. She finally lowered her head in a fluster and mumbled, Thanks for the advice. Klein, meanwhile, acted like he hadn't just dropped an emotional bomb on her. So it's a busy day, huh? Sunday afternoon, about 50 members. Angelica replied in a hoarse voice. Tea or coffee? She asked, trying to recover her composure. Saibe black tea, Klein replied, taking off his hat and casually walking into the meeting room, leaving Angelica to process her mini breakdown. The Divination Club's meeting room was huge, almost twice the vamp, nearly twice the size of Klein's high school classroom. In the past, only 5 or 6 members would be present, making it look extremely empty. But now, dozens of fortune tellers sat scattered around, filling up most of the room. Sunlight streamed through a few oriel windows as members either whispered among themselves, asked Hanas Vincent questions, practiced divination, or simply drank coffee and read newspapers. The scene made Klein feel nostalgic for his school days, though back then it was way noisier and chaotic compared to the peaceful atmosphere here. He scanned the room, but didn't spot any familiar faces like Glacis or Edward Steve. So, he grabbed a divination textbook, found a quiet corner, and flipped through it leisurely. Soon after, Angelica returned with a cup of tea, placing it gently on the table in front of Klein. As she quietly turned to leave, something caught her eye. She noticed Klein pull an exquisite silver chain from his left sleeve, with a chunk of pure topaz hanging from it. Curious, Angelica slowed down, her gaze fixed on Klein. Klein held the silver chain with his left hand, letting the topaz dangle just above the surface of his tea. His expression turned serene, eyes half closed, as the topaz began to sway gently in a clockwise motion. Angelica found the scene oddly mesmerizing, making Mr. Moretti seem even more mysterious in her eyes. "The black tea you serve is excellent," Klein said softly, opening his eyes and smiling. His actions were no coincidence. They were meant for Angelica to see. After all, he needed her recommendation to attract more clients. If he was going to play the part of a seer, he would go all in, leaving no room for doubt. "Yes, Mr. Vanis is very particular about tea quality," Angelica replied, still somewhat stunned. Klein carefully stowed away his spirit pendulum and lifted the floral-patterned porcelain teacup. With a warm smile, he politely gestured to Angelica with his cup. Angelica returned to the reception hall, but her mind was too distracted to read magazines. She sat there, gazing off into the distance, deep in thought. Suddenly, a series of knocks on the door snapped her out of her reverie. She turned to see a lady in a light blue dress enter, taking off her veiled hat adorned with a powder blue ribbon. The woman's face looked calm, yet tinged with melancholy. "Good afternoon, esteemed lady. Would you like to join the Divination Club, or are you here for a divination?" Angelica asked, her words flowing automatically. "I'm here for a divination," the lady replied softly, her beautiful eyes clouded with sorrow as she bit her lower lip. Angelica led her to a sofa and explained how the Divination Club operated. Afterward, she handed the lady an album of fortune tellers. "You can choose anyone you like." The lady flipped through the album with a serious expression. With so many fortune tellers available that day, the abundance of choices seemed to overwhelm her. "Could you recommend someone? From these few pages?" She pointed to a section in the middle of the album, excluding the more expensive and cheaper fortune tellers. Angelica took the album and studied it for a moment before suggesting, "I recommend this gentleman." The lady glanced at the page and saw a fortune teller named Klein Moretti. "Mr. Moretti just joined the club. Is his divination reliable?" she asked, her worry evident. Angelica nodded confidently. "Another club member and I both believe Mr. Moretti is an outstanding fortune teller. If it weren't for the fact that he just joined, his fees would be much higher." "I see," the lady replied, looking slightly more at ease. "I'll choose Mr. Moretti then." "Very well. Please wait here for a moment." Angelica took the album and made her way to the meeting room. She approached Klein and whispered, "Mr. Moretti, someone has requested your services for a divination. Which room would you like to use?" Success, Klein thought, realizing he had landed his first client. He set down his teacup and with a calm nod replied, "The topaz room." "All right," Angelica said, leading Klein to the topaz room and opening the wooden door for him. Klein sat behind the table, which was arranged with various divination tools. It wasn't long before the woman in the light blue dress entered the room, her head slightly bowed in sadness. As she closed the door, Klein took the opportunity to tap his glabella twice, activating his spirit vision. Her stomach's yellow aura seemed somewhat dull, while the dark colors of her emotions were heavy, filled mostly with worry and anxiety. Klein carefully observed her before deactivating his spirit vision. "Good day, Mr. Moretti," the woman greeted him as she sat down. "Good afternoon. How may I address you?" Klein asked politely, though he didn't expect to get her real name. After all, from his internet days, Klein knew that many people preferred using aliases during a divination. "You can call me Anna," the lady replied as she removed her veiled hat. With a mix of anticipation and doubt, she looked at Klein and said, "I would like a divination regarding my fiancé. He traveled to the southern continent in March for a business deal. Last month, on the 3rd, he sent a telegram to me and his family saying he was about to set sail and return, but he hasn't come back. At first, I thought his delay was due to the Berserk Ocean's weather, but it's been over a month. The ship he boarded, the Alfalfa, still hasn't arrived at Enmat Harbor. The Berserk Ocean, located between the northern and southern continents, was infamous for its treacherous weather and dangerous currents. If it hadn't been for Emperor Rosel's efforts to discover safer sailing routes, the northern continent's colonization era might never have begun, let alone the establishment of an undersea telegraph cable. Klein listened carefully to his very first client as a seer and asked thoughtfully, "Which divination method do you wish to use?" Chapter 55, Revelation. Anna, with her stunning eyes, hesitated for more than 10 seconds. It was like watching someone try to choose a flavor at an ice cream parlor while their friends were just there for the free samples. "You can pick any method that you believe will be accurate," Klein said, his voice calm and collected. "You're the fortune teller here, not me. Just a heads up, though. Besides cards, I've dabbled in studying them at home. Honestly, they felt more like overpriced coasters or a game of guess your future." Klein pondered for a moment, leaning his wrists on the edge of the table like he was about to drop the hottest mixtape of the year. He steepled his hands, gazing peacefully, and declared, "Then we shall use the astrolabe. It's like a cosmic crystal ball, but without the sparkles." He gestured to a fountain pen and a stack of white paper like a game show host revealing the grand prize. "Write down your fiancé's name, his facial features, address, and date of birth. If you can remember the exact time he popped into the world, that'd be even better. Just for the fun of it." Klein took one look at her stylish outfit and perfectly done makeup and thought, no way is she illiterate. She probably knows how to spell extravagance without breaking a sweat. Anna didn't respond immediately. She reached for a piece of paper, lifted the pen, dipped it in ink, and started writing, pausing occasionally as if she were composing a sonnet. 2 minutes later, she pushed the paper toward Klein, looking a bit like a contestant who just revealed their answer on a game show. Klein took the paper, flipped it around, and read, "Joyce Meyer, 15th September 1323, 2 p.m., Tingen City, East Borough, 8 Stevens Street. Short blonde hair, aquiline nose." With a quick glance, he calculated Joyce's spiritual number like he was on a math competition. 1 plus 5 equals 6. In the mystical world of spirit numerology, this was called the birthday path number. It was like a life blueprint before the age of 27. From ages 27 to 54, you had your birth month path number. After 54, you just had to hope for the best. Since it was July 1349, Joyce wasn't even 27 yet. Klein immediately focused on that juicy birthday path number. The number 6 represented a balanced and harmonious life, with a heart for giving and a decent marriage or engagement. Basically, he was set up to be the poster boy for relationship goals. Next, Klein moved on to calculating Joyce's year path number. This involved replacing the birth year with the current year and adding it all up. 1 plus 3 plus 4 plus 9 equals 17. 1 plus 7 equals 8. Then he added 9, birth month path number, plus 6, birthday path number, equals 23. 2 plus 3 equals 5. Joyce's year path number was 5, signifying he was in for some changes and possibly an accident, like stepping on a Lego but much worse. Klein mentally checked off all the boxes. Anna's information was spot on. He looked up at Anna, whose expression was a mix of hope and concern. Mr. Meyer set off on his journey on the 3rd of June? If he didn't lie, that is indeed the case. Anna bit her lip, probably imagining the worst. "All right," Klein said, jotting it down like a professor at the end of a lecture. He locked eyes with Anna and said gently, "I'll begin creating the astrolabe now. It'll require some time and absolute silence. Mind stepping outside? Angelica can brew you a cup of tea or coffee or whatever caffeine fix you fancy." "All right." Anna nodded, already used to the quirks of fortune tellers. She stood, grabbed her hat with the light blue ribbon like she was off to a garden party, and left the topaz room. Once the door was closed, Klein locked it, returning to his table with a sense of purpose. He set up the astrolabe, calculating everything from horoscopes to the positions of planets as if he were some sort of cosmic DJ. He didn't even need to crack open the astromancy manual. Everything flowed from memory. Over the last few days of his mysticism studies, Klein realized he had a knack for divination, that felt more like an instinct than learned knowledge. Maybe that's the perk of being a seer. With the astrolabe completed, he felt a wave of relief wash over him, as if a weight had lifted from his shoulders. As he gazed at the astrolabe's layout, he traced the paths of the horoscopes and planets. His mind settled on the fact that Joyce Meyer had encountered an accident but would ultimately survive it. Thank the stars for that. But Klein was all about first impressions. He wanted to nail this first business transaction and build a reputation that would get him future gigs. He picked up the pen again and wrote in Hermes, Joyce Meyer's current situation. He read the sentence silently, committing it to memory, repeating it like a mantra. After 7 repetitions, Klein leaned back in his chair, feeling like a Zen master. He imagined a sphere of light and let his eyes grow darker, slipping into a state of cogitation. The surroundings blurred, transforming into a surreal dreamscape. A formless fog surrounded him, like he'd walked into a scene from a weird art film. Klein recalled the contents of the paper, relaxed, and slipped into a deep trance. He was about to use a dream divination technique, a fancy way of saying he was going to take a nap for fortune-telling. Repeating the question in his mind and remembering the details, he let his astral projection drift into the spirit world, hoping for some epic revelations. Ordinary folks might have dream experiences, but they often come back with more questions than answers. Not a seer, though. Klein could see the images clearly. As his mind wandered deeper, he saw a blond young man with an aquiline nose swimming frantically in a sea of blood, flailing around like a fish out of water. But he broke through the waves, emerging onto the shore. The scene morphed into a blue house with a toy windmill at the door. The blond guy was entering slowly, a look of joy on his face, as if he just found out he'd won the lottery. But then, the vision shifted again. Suddenly, he was inside a grand palace that looked like it had seen better days. The walls were crumbling, moss creeping in like an unwelcome houseguest. Through gaping holes, he glimpsed a mountain peak shrouded in clouds. Atop the palace sat a massive throne carved from stone, adorned with dull gemstones and gold that looked more like a medieval DIY project than royal furniture. It felt like a throne meant for a giant, not exactly the cozy seat for an afternoon chat. As Klein gazed around, confusion set in. Why was he dreaming about a dilapidated palace? His mind sharpened, and he instinctively moved toward the exit, desperate to figure out where he was. Suddenly, he felt a gaze on him. A heavy stare, cold and unyielding, came from behind. Klein whirled around to the giant stone throne, only to be greeted by the unsettling sight of countless transparent maggots wriggling and twitching, a scene straight out of a horror flick. Klein gasped and jolted awake, the crystal balls, tarot cards, and astrolabe coming back into focus. Reality hit him like a ton of bricks. The initial dream, that was the divination. But the later one, that felt oddly personal, like he'd just wandered into a cosmic episode of What the Hell Was That? A palace not meant for humans, the stare, the bizarre vision of maggots. Klein rubbed his temples deep in thought. This wasn't just his subconscious messing with him. He was the one doing the divination. Could it be that the luck enhancement ritual had reached out to that existence? Or was it something to do with the Antigonus family's notebook? Right. The notebook mentioned the nation of the Evernight in the Hornacis mountain range. The palace in his dream was perched atop a mountain peak. He made a simple deduction, relief washing over him. Thank goodness he chose seer. According to old Neil, mystery priors could also divine through dreams, but it was never as effective as a seer. Sigh, it sure wasn't letting him off the hook, was it? All he could hope for was the early capture of Ray Bieber. Klein collected himself and picked up the astrolabe diagram. He strolled toward the door, determined to find out how this all connected. He opened the door and stepped into the reception area, where Anna was gazing out the window, completely ignoring her cup of black tea like it was a bad ex. "Ah, Mr. Moretti, is there a result?" she exclaimed, turning toward him like a startled deer. Klein didn't answer her right away. Instead, he asked, recalling the revelation from his dream, "Does your house, or Mr. Meyer's house, have a toy windmill?" Anna's eyes widened, her expression a mix of shock and confusion. After a beat, she muttered, "That was a present he gave me. It is by the door at my house. How did you know that?" "See, can this be divined?" Klein smiled and spoke with a gentle tone. "Congratulations, Miss Anna. Mr. Joyce Meyer is currently a guest at your place. If you rush back, you should still be able to meet him. He just experienced a calamity, an unimaginably painful journey. What he needs now are not questions, but consolation and a warm hug. Really? Anna asked in disbelief. The fortune tellers she knew would never speak with such certainty or give such firm conclusions. You will know if you go back immediately, Klein replied with a gentle tone and smile. Oh, Lord of Steam, is that true? Has my poor Joyce returned? Are you certain? No, I cannot believe it. Anna froze for a moment and said a few delirious words. She took out a one-solly note from her purse and did not wait for Klein to give her the change. She broke into a small jog as she left the Divination Club, taking a carriage back home. Does this include my tip? Klein looked at the note and shook his head with a laugh. A two-wheeled carriage steered quickly across the streets and entered East Borough. Anna watched the streets sweeping past her, feeling a mixture of unease, anticipation, and fear. It did not take long before the toy windmill entered her field of vision. She got off the carriage, showing no care for her bearing. She staggered quickly towards the door and rang the doorbell. The door creaked open, revealing a blond young man dressed in a black formal suit. He was haggard, but his eyes carried a glint of joy. He had an aquiline nose. I thought that I would miss you today, Joyce said with a smile. Oh, exalted Steam, you really are back! Anna rubbed her eyes, exclaiming in pleasant surprise. What the fortune teller said was true. No, that was a real seer. It was simply fascinating. Thoughts welled in her mind as Anna pounced forward with tears in her eyes and gave her fiancé a warm hug. Joyce embraced her tightly, relief flooding through him. I missed you so much. You have no idea what I've been through. Tell me everything, she urged, pulling back slightly to look into his eyes. I was on my way back when I had an accident, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I fell into a river, and I thought I wouldn't make it, but I fought through, and now here I am. Anna's heart raced at his words. I was so scared. I thought I had lost you. I'm right here, Joyce reassured her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I'll always come back to you. With each passing moment, the weight of their challenges began to lift. The toy windmill outside turned slowly, seemingly tossing all their difficulties far away. Chapter 56, Escape from the Sea. In a rather spacious living room, Anna and Joyce were seated on different sofas, separated by Anna's parents. Talk about a dramatic family reunion. Thankfully, no one brought a fruitcake this time. Joyce sighed with a satisfied expression and said, Exalted Steam, I am so lucky to come back alive, to be able to see Anna again. My poor Joyce, what happened? Anna couldn't help but ask with concern, probably already planning the next family therapy session. Joyce took a glance at his fiancée, and his expression turned grave. I still feel terrified to this day. I keep waking up from my dreams again and again. 5 days after the Alfalfa left Caesar Pier, we came across pirates, scary pirates. The only fortunate thing was that their leader's name was Nast. The pirate that calls himself the King of the Five Seas? Anna's father, Mr. Wayne, asked in shock, probably imagining a treasure map and a parrot. Although Joyce had already been there for half an hour, he did not volunteer details about his ordeal. He appeared to be fearful, perturbed, and uneasy. It was only after Anna returned and hugged him that he finally seemed to put it behind him. A hug that could probably fix a broken leg. Yes, due to his declaration of being a descendant of the Solomon Empire, the King of the Five Seas, Nast didn't believe in killing captives. Hence, we were only robbed and didn't lose our lives. His subordinates even left us sufficient food, Joyce said as he recalled the ordeal, trying to sound more like a survivor and less like someone who just lost a game of Monopoly. His body started to quiver, but he continued to describe his deepest and scariest nightmare. I didn't lose much of my wealth. I believed that my misfortune was over. But as we continued towards our destination, a heated conflict erupted among the Alfalfa's passengers and crew. From disagreement to fighting to drawing revolvers and raising swords to kill each other, I saw nothing but blood during that period. One after another, people beside me fell with eyes opened, never to be closed. Their limbs, hearts, and intestines were scattered across the floors. Talk about a gruesome dinner party. I still can't find my meatballs. Those of us who were unwilling to turn into savage beasts, the rational group, had nowhere to hide and nowhere to escape. We were surrounded by deep blue waves and the boundless ocean. Some wailed, some begged for mercy, some sold their bodies, but their heads were hung from the mast either way. I guess there's always a price for piracy. Anna, I reeled in despair back then. I thought I would never see you again. Fortunately, in such a nightmare, there was still a hero. The captain took us to hide in the sturdy keel of the ship, and we relied on the stored water and food there until the maniacs reached their limits. Mr. Triss encouraged us, courageously leading us in an assault against those murderers. After an unforgettable bloody battle, we survived. But the Alfalfa strayed off course, and only a third of the original sailors remained. At least we didn't have to share the leftovers. When he depicted the most horrible and darkest side of the human psyche, Joyce couldn't help but recall the hero, the man that called himself Triss. He had a round and amiable face. He was shy like a girl and enjoyed staying in a corner. Only people whom he was familiar with knew that he was a very good conversationalist. But when the chips were down, he was the one who actually spoke up instead of hiding behind the sofa like the rest of us. Oh, exalted steam, my poor Joyce. You went through such a heartbreaking ordeal. Thank God, praise be to God, he prevented us from eternal separation. Tears welled up in Anna's eyes as she constantly dotted 3 points to form a triangle, the sacred emblem for steam and machinery. Maybe next time, skip the triangle and just draw a smiley face. Joyce revealed a faint, pale smile. This is the reward for our faith. The Alfalfa then went through storms, lost its course, and after surmounting one challenge after another, arrived at Enmat Harbor. Talk about a journey that would make a reality TV show look tame. Due to the bloodbath that had taken place on the boat, those of us that survived were held captive by the police and questioned separately. We didn't have a chance to send telegrams home to update our loved ones. When they released us this morning, I immediately borrowed some money from my friend and took the steam locomotive back. Thank God for letting me set foot on the land of Tingen again, allowing me to see all of you again. Then, he looked towards his fiancée in confusion. Anna, when you saw me, I could feel your happiness and surprise, but I couldn't understand why you rushed towards the door so excitedly right after you got off the carriage. Heh, I had planned on giving you a huge surprise. Anna thought about what had happened earlier and continued in disbelief. There's nothing to hide, Joyce. As I was worried about you, I went to the only divination club in Tingen City today for a divination. That fortune teller. No, the seer told me. He said, your fiancé has returned. He's in the house with a windmill. What? The Wayne couple and Joyce exclaimed simultaneously, sounding like they were in a game show. Anna covered her face and shook her head. I can barely believe it either, but it happened. Exalted steam. Perhaps there really are miracles in this world. Or maybe the seer had a good Wi-Fi connection. Joyce, that seer asked me for your name, characteristics, address, and birth date. He told me he was going to do an astrolabe divination. Then, he asked me if the house with a toy windmill was yours or mine. When I confirmed it was mine, he said, congratulations, Miss Anna. Mr. Watchik, Joyce Meyer is currently a guest at your place. What he needs now are not questions, but consolation and a warm hug. God, Joyce found it unbelievable and incomprehensible. Does he know me? Did someone send him a telegram? Could it be that he is familiar with the police in Enmat Harbor? No, that doesn't explain it. How did he know that I came to your place? How could he possibly know that you would seek a divination? Did you make an appointment? No, I made a selection at the last minute. Anna replied with a vacant-looking expression, probably regretting that she hadn't brought popcorn for this plot twist. Perhaps a good seer needs to be in control of vast amounts of information, even if it cannot be used anytime soon. Perhaps that is the fascinating aspect of divination. Anna's father, Mr. Wayne, sighed and concluded. In the known history of more than 1,000 years, and in the uncertain fourth epoch, divination has existed and has yet to disappear. I think there must be a reason for that. Maybe we just need a good laugh. Joyce shook his head lightly and asked, what's that seer's name? Anna thought and said, Klein Moretti, in the reception lobby of the Divination Club. As Klein had spoken softly, Angelica knew not to go close. Therefore, she only saw Anna leave as though she had lost her soul, wearing shock and confusion on her face. Angelica briskly walked to the sofa and asked out of curiosity, Was the result good? She did not dare ask the actual result, afraid of violating the unspoken rule of fortune tellers. Yeah. Klein nodded and took out 3 copper coins from his pocket. 1/8 of one soldi is 1.5 pennies, right? Yes. Angelica looked at the copper coins and realized that one of them was a penny and 2 of them were halfpence. She quickly held it out and said, "There's an additional halfpence." Klein smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for taking care of my customer. She gave me a tip, so it's only right I give you one." "It's also to thank you for recommending me," he added in his heart. "All right." Angelica felt an unknown fear of Klein, but since the reason was appropriate, she didn't refuse the offer. Klein returned to the meeting room, believing that there would be more people requesting his divinations. However, he did not receive a second customer by 40 minutes past 5. It wasn't because the Divination Club's business was poor, but because most people had already chosen a fortune teller. They likely were recommended by others and had long determined whose services to hire. In short, I'm still lacking in reputation. Klein laughed at himself for using game terminology. He finished his 3rd cup of side black tea, grabbed his top hat and silver-edged walking stick, and walked leisurely out of the meeting room. Angelica suddenly recalled Glass's instructions, and she quickly moved to intercept him. "Mr. Moretti, when will you next visit the club? Mr. Glasses would like to thank you in person." "I will come over whenever I'm free. If fate permits us, he will definitely meet me," Klein replied, using the tone of a psychic charlatan, as though he was in character. Then he left the club before Angelica could respond and took the public carriage home. When he stepped through the door, Klein found Benson reading the newspaper and Melissa putting together bits and pieces of gears, bearings, and springs in the evening sunlight. "Good afternoon. Did Mrs. Shad visit?" Klein asked casually. Benson didn't put down his newspaper. Instead, he lifted his head. "Mrs. Shad's visit lasted 15 minutes. She brought some gifts, and she was very happy with the muffins and lemon cake that we prepared. She also invited us over whenever we have the chance to. She is a friendly, well-mannered lady. She knows how to carry a conversation very well, too." The only problem is their belief in the Lord of Storms. They believe that girls shouldn't go to school, but should be homeschooled instead, Melissa complained. It was obvious that she was very upset about it. "Don't mind that. As long as she doesn't disturb us, she will still be a good neighbor." Klein comforted his sister, smiling. The Lone Kingdom was a multi-religious nation, unlike the Frosak Empire in the north, which only believed in the god of combat, or the Fainapotter Kingdom in the south, which only worshipped Mother Earth. It was inevitable that the congregations from the 3 major churches of the Lord of Storms, the Evernight Goddess, and the god of steam and machinery had conflicts in beliefs and customs. After 1,000 years of this, they restrained each other, making coexistence possible. Okay. Melissa pursed her lips and redirected her focus onto the pile of parts again. After dinner, Klein continued revising history. Only when Melissa and Benson showered and returned to their rooms did he wash up, enter his bedroom, and lock his door. He needed to organize and summarize what he had learned and the problems that he encountered to prevent himself from forgetting or missing out any critical points. Only by doing so would he be able to respond to subsequent developments in the future with a clear train of thought. Klein flipped open his notebook, took out his pen, and started writing in Mandarin. Why is the key to digesting potions acting? Chapter 57, Organization and Summary. After pausing for a moment, Klein continued writing. The essence of resolving the problems with potions is through digestion, not simply controlling it. This can be understood in a straightforward manner, like when you try to control your diet but end up devouring a whole pizza instead. Merely controlling it would be akin to using the power of potions as an external tool. A tamed beast, no matter how well controlled, would ultimately not be a part of a person. The risk of it turning on them would be ever present, like that friend who promises to help you move but ghosts you when it's time to lift the couch. As for digestion, it is to view the downed potion as a part of them. They can break it down, fuse with it, absorb it, and form an overall system, kind of like how I fuse donuts and regret after every late-night snack session. I am currently certain of this point. What is more important is how acting helps in digestion. Spoiler alert, It's not about pretending to chew your food while scrolling through your phone. According to my experience as a seer today, I can make two hypotheses. They can be verified in the future, assuming the universe doesn't implode first. 1. Acting based on the potion's name changes the state of one's body, heart, and soul, making them closer to the remnant, headstrong psyche of the potion's core. This results in resonance, which allows gradual assimilation and absorption, kind of like how my ex absorbed my will to live after that last date. 2. The remnant headstrong psyche spirit of the magic medicine might be like a computer with complete defensive mechanisms. If one wishes to attack it and break it down, they will need to find a bug, security hole, or key. The name of the potion provides a corresponding clue. Thus, we can disguise our body, heart, and soul as part of the system through acting, and so we deceive the system's defenses. This line of thought is similar to Emperor Roselle's description. Imagine hacking into a system while wearing a clown costume. No matter which guess is right, there is no escaping the body, heart, and soul, for they are the only bridge between acting and the power of potions. I mean, unless you have Wi-Fi, then anything is possible. Klein put down his pen and looked at the paragraph of text. For a moment, he even wanted to thank the education he received from the foodaholic empire. Yes, that was a real place, I think. No matter if he chose science or engineering for his further education, he was equipped with the basics of logical thought. Otherwise, there was no way he could have become a keyboard warrior, nor would he have been able to analyze his current situation, like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while blindfolded. Acting might have an effect, but we'll have to wait and see for the specifics, Klein guessed. After that, he wrote down his second question. Why would a seer, being more well-learned and professional in the domain of mysticism, be lacking in means when it comes to direct combat? Wouldn't being more well-learned and professional make a seer even more powerful, giving them the ability to discover a way to defeat their enemies? The reasons could be. First, just like the web novels I've read in the past, I have transmigrated to a game world that has become reality. Thus, different jobs come with different specialties that have to be balanced against each other. But up to this point, there has been no sign of this world being a game, nor are there signs of mission-like developments. I'll put this reason on hold, but it's very unlikely, unless I suddenly start hearing level up in my head. Second, the fundamental law of this world is balance. The creator made this world with the core idea of balance, like how my life is a constant battle between going to the gym and binge watching Netflix. Third, potions at the same sequence level would have the same level of power. It is the most optimal state based on what our forefathers found out and summarized. Exceeding this level of power would make it easier for one to collapse and lose control. Below this level of power would make it such that one would not obtain the desired beyonder powers. Thus, under the situation of a balanced power level, being stronger in one area would naturally mean that one is weaker in another area, like my strength in lifting weights, but weakness in lifting my spirit on Mondays. Fourth, everything in this world originated from the same source. They were formed by the remnants of the Creator. Thus, everything in this world is technically fragments of the Creator, and the fact that they have to complement each other would mean that there are inherent shortcomings to an individual, like how I'm great at procrastinating but terrible at actually doing my laundry. I am leaning towards the third and fourth reasons, but the latter stems from an unconfirmed myth and can only serve as a guide. Thus, I shall use the third reason as a guide and try to ascertain it using my current knowledge and future studies, if only my studies included how to summon a pizza at 3 a.m. At this point, Klein had already written 2 full pages, but did not stop. Instead, he penned a new question. From what I learned today, my luck enhancement ritual is categorized as a classic ritualistic magic. Similar kinds of ritualistic magic can be split into 3 parts, the first being a sacrifice that sparks the interest of a corresponding existence. The second is comprised of incantations specifically describing the existence in question. The third is using simple formatting and symbols to convey what one is asking for. Using this as a benchmark to analyze the luck enhancement ritual, there's an obvious problem. There is no third part. It has the sacrifice aspect in the placement of staple foods and walking a square in a counterclockwise manner with 4 steps. So basically, my Saturday night routine. There is also a clear indication of who the incantation is for, such as the phrase, blessings stem from the immortal Lord of heaven and earth. But all I did after was close my eyes and wait. There was nothing in the ritual that described the goal of enhancing my luck. In other words, the corresponding existence has no way of knowing what the so-called luck enhancement ritual is asking for and can only do as they see fit. Do as they see fit. What a troll! Isn't that darn quintessential divination and arcane arts of the Qin and Han dynasty too much of a troll? I must have had rocks in my head back then for trying. Klein stopped writing and took 2 deep breaths, trying hard to calm himself down. He spat out a foul breath and continued writing. I can consider redesigning the ritual, making it more complete. The motive of the ritual shall be to return to Earth, back to the world with my parents and friends, without having to deal with awkward family dinners. Then here comes the question. Was the entity truly acting on a whim, or is there a deeper meaning to it? Also, is the entity that the descriptive incantations point towards in this world the same one from Earth? If so, the difference in results between the first and second ritual could be explained as the entity doing as it wishes. But the results of me appearing above the gray fog during the second and third time while being able to connect to justice and the hanged man has basically no differences. Why would that be so? If the fourth ritual tomorrow afternoon shows me the same stable results, that would mean that the effects are consistent. That would mean that the unknown entity has an agenda I do not know about. If that is the case, adding new descriptions and requests would not get me a clear response. In fact, it might complicate the ritual and result in adverse effects, like trying to order a complicated drink at a dive bar. Would the difference between the first ritual and the subsequent rituals, under the premise that the entity I called upon is the same one, mean that the results would be different depending on the world I'm in? It is like I am using a different interface. Then how can I design it to obtain my desired outcome? If I think that the entities behind the first and subsequent rituals are different, some of the questions can be perfectly answered. But similarly, the stability of the results in the second and third rituals would mean that the entity I am praying to has a certain agenda, and there is no way I can change that for the time being. The most important question is the identity of the entity that the ritual is directed. Where is he? And why doesn't he give me any clues or guidance? Could he be deep in the world of fog? Can I treat him as an entity in slumber, an entity that would give fixed responses if I give him a certain stimulus, but would not interfere with what I do other than that? Then I can introduce a different ritual as a stimulus and conclude whether the feedback I receive is regular. That way, I can find the correct method of returning. But the problem lies in the possibility that he is not asleep. In that case, such tests might result in terrifying outcomes. It might be really dangerous, like testing a new recipe on your unsuspecting friends. The first attempt must be conducted with extreme caution. The design must not anger the being. What a headache! I need more knowledge. Klein sighed and gave a summary. Finally, he wrote down other miscellaneous items. There are always formless voices resonating in my ears, shouting Hornasis and, was it saying Frygria or Phagria? Hornasis is the mountain range dividing the Loan Kingdom and the Intis Republic. Its main peak is 6,000 meters above sea level. According to the records in the Antigonus family's diary, there existed a nation of the Evernight in the Fourth Epoch. Is the nation of the Evernight related to the Evernight goddess? Is there any connection between the two? Are they allies or enemies? Was the Antigonus family obliterated by the Church of the Evernight goddess due to Nation of the Evernight? Did I hear murmurings coming from the diary, from the howls of the Antigonus family over 1 or 2,000 years? What then does Phlegria mean? An interesting question. To be able to leave behind such a diary, to leave behind sealed artifact 2049, implies that the Antigonus family had possession of a relatively powerful Beyonder power. If that is so, which sequence did they possess? Was it complete or not complete? My realization that the diary is in the hands of Ray Bieber was a bit of a coincidence, but without any indication of it being arranged, could my fate really be tied up with that diary's? His ideas were penned on the pieces of paper. Klein tried his best to write down the events he had experienced and his guesses about their meaning. He wrote a total of 4 pages on both sides of each page. Rip! Klein suddenly tore off the 4 pages and read them from top to bottom, sometimes marking certain sections with his pen, adding a few sentences at other times. Time flew quickly. The crimson moon was temporarily covered by dark clouds. Klein picked up the pocket watch on the table, snapped it open, and looked at the time. He put down the watch and took out a box of matches from his drawer. He lit one and brought it close to the 4 pages of notes. The orange flame ignited the edges of the paper and quickly spread. Klein placed the notes on top of the wooden dustbin and watched the ashes drop. He then released his fingers, allowing the papers to fall. In just 10 seconds, everything had disappeared. All that was left was the still swirling ash and the charred bottom of the dustbin. As there was Emperor Rosel's secret diary in this world, Klein did not dare leave behind any evidence that he knew how to write Chinese. If old Neil and the rest discovered the 4 pieces of paper he wrote, he would have no idea how to explain the matter. And while writing the confidential questions, Klein was worried that the one paying attention to his dreams would be able to see and decipher the contents no matter which language he used, be it Loan, Ancient Phasak, or Hermes. Therefore, he could only write notes in Chinese to organize and summarize. After he was done with the task, he burned the notes to leave no traces. And precisely because there was no way of saving, he set up a plan for himself. He would do this summary once a week, just in case he forgot anything. As he watched the ashes fall, Klein pulled out a white piece of paper. He wrote the title, "To My Respected Mentor." He wanted to write to Senior Associate Professor Quentin Cohen, asking if he had any relevant historical information about the main peak of the Hornasis mountain range. Chapter 58, A Train of Thought. The next day, a Monday morning. Klein, who had the day off, didn't bother leaving home. Instead, he handed Melissa his letter directed to mentor Cohen Quentin, along with more than enough cash for stamps. He entrusted her with the mission of mailing it at the post office near the Tianjin Technical School where she was busy pretending to study. Classic college life, right? After breakfast, he decided to catch up on sleep, courtesy of the previous night's work. Apparently, working late involved more than just paperwork. He only woke up because his stomach was grumbling louder than an angry mob around noon. He heated up some leftovers from the night before. Who knew reheating cold pizza was an art form? And paired it with a loaf of rye bread. Talk about a gourmet breakfast. Klein grabbed a newspaper and headed to the bathroom on the second floor. Every time he did that, he couldn't help but sigh at the lack of a cell phone. I mean, who wants to read boring news when they could be scrolling through memes? After about 7 or 8 minutes, because who really counts? He left the toilet feeling like a new man and washed his hands like he was about to perform surgery. He then returned to his bedroom and locked his door like he was about to pull off a heist. Klein drew the curtains, lit up the gas lamp, and meditated for half an hour. After practicing his spiritual vision, spirit dowsing, and dowsing rod for another half hour, basically the adult version of playing with toys, he spent an additional hour mentally reviewing the mysticism knowledge he had gained recently. Can we say overachiever? Once done, he ripped up the old newspaper and crumpled them into a few balls, not unlike his hopes and dreams. He wrote on them, moonflower candle, full moon essence oil, and other names of materials as if he was compiling a grocery list for the witch in the woods. He followed the steps of ritualistic magic in his head to master every little detail. Until he was entirely familiar with it, he didn't intend to try ritualistic magic, because who wants to waste materials and potentially summon a demonic Uber driver? He repeated everything again and again until he picked up his silver pocket watch, which was adorned with vine leaves, and took a glance. It was 2:45. He mulled it over for a few seconds and decided to bring the scraps of old newspapers to the kitchen on the first floor to burn them. While doing so, he made sure he was in an optimal state of mind, like a Zen master preparing for a tarot gathering. Locking his bedroom door once again, Klein didn't wait for the clock to strike 3. He planned to enter the area above the gray fog ahead of time, because why not be fashionably early? He wanted to seize the chance to explore the place thoroughly. As Klein stood in an empty spot in his room and started walking counterclockwise, because clockwise is so last season, he suddenly worried that Justice and the Hanged Man had yet to enter a suitable environment. Then he thought about something that might ruin his day. Would they be disturbed or discovered? He had previously mentioned allowing Justice and the Hanged Man to apply for leave ahead of time if they needed to skip the gathering for reasons like, I can't find my lucky socks, or unexpected circumstances like being abducted by aliens. In the past, that would have been an unsolvable problem for Klein. There was no way he could build an entire server-based internet by hand in a different world, right? Any technology beyond telegrams would totally expose him. But now, inspiration struck from ritualistic magic like lightning from a clear sky. Ritualistic magic borrows the powers of others by seeking help from different existences. Similar incantations would make it clear who they are directed to at the beginning, such as the Evernight Goddess or the Lady of Crimson. It would be a description of the unknown and clandestine existences. Then, can I amend the chant and redirect the beginning of the chant towards myself? Like, yo, it's me. This way, even if Justice and the Hanged Man conduct the ritual in different locations, I would receive their messages like a magical group chat. Klein suddenly felt a fresh insight as he began analyzing the likelihood of the method working. There are 2 difficulties. First, I am not an incredibly strong high-level sequencer. Even if the description of the incantation was directed to me, I couldn't possibly receive the request. Second, how can I ensure that the description of the chant is directed at me accurately and doesn't stray off to some other unknown existence that fits the description? Because let's face it, I'd rather not summon a hungry spirit looking for snacks. Klein paced back and forth, deep in thought for a possible workable solution, going in circles like he was training for a marathon. Then he linked the matter with the mysterious world of the gray fog. Even if I can't receive the message, that doesn't mean the gray fog can't. Its connection with the crimson stars can drag a person into the space directly, regardless of where they are in the physical world, like a bad Tinder date you can't escape. I could consider tying myself to the mysterious space together during the directed description. In accordance with this train of thought, even though I might not immediately receive the request, when the other party is holding the ritual, I will still be able to see the corresponding messages whenever I enter the gray fog. To put it simply, it's like the difference between being online and offline on an instant messaging app. Swipe right for connection. Klein became more excited the more he thought. He felt that his idea was worth a shot. What kind of description could be used to precisely direct a message to me and to the gray fog world? He started brainstorming, which was clearly dangerous. In fact, he had an incantation that would definitely work. It was none other than the low-end translation of "Blessings stem from the celestial worthy of heaven and earth." But herein lies the problem. He would lose control of the gray fog and lose his leading role. He could only exclude it. Fool from an alternate world? No way. It's accurate, but it would expose my biggest secret. Just call me Klein the Clueless. He thought of one incantation after another, but crossed each one off like a bad Tinder match. After about 7 to 8 minutes, he finally decided on the description of the first paragraph that directed to him. The fool that doesn't belong to this era. It was obviously not accurate enough. Therefore, Klein quickly added, the mysterious ruler above the gray fog. The combination of the 2 lines practically limited it to him, while tying the gray fog to him like a pair of old socks that refused to let go. It's still a little short. I cannot eliminate the possibility that there are multiple spaces and rulers above the gray fog. I cannot eliminate the fact that the description might be directed to the spirit world. Klein creased his eyebrows and planned on making it more certain. He thought for a full minute and finally decided on the last part of the description. The king of yellow and black who wields good luck. It shared a similar meaning to blessings stem from the exalted thearch of heaven and earth. If the incantation purely depended on that part of the description, it might end up being directed away and provoking unknown dangerous existences. But with the first two lines as a limitation, along with his experience of arriving above the fog through a similar incantation, he believed that the target's description could result in a perfect lock-on. Klein wasn't sure if casting the ritualistic magic with those three descriptions would be effective, but he was confident it wouldn't attract the attention of another existence. It wouldn't throw Justice and the Hanged Man into danger, because nobody likes being a side character in their own horror story. Klein heaved out a long sigh and recited the incantation that he had decided upon. The fool that doesn't belong to this era, you are the mysterious ruler above the gray fog. You are the king of yellow and black who wields good luck. He nodded his head slightly and took out his pocket watch to confirm the time. It's already 2:58. Without further thought, Klein put away his pocket watch and entered cogitation. Pairs of eyes judging his life. Klein's mind drifted back to the hours he spent in the shadows of Backlund, where every passerby wore a mask of indifference, their faces flickering under the gas lamps like moths caught in a spider's web. In those moments, he felt as though he were being dissected, scrutinized by the Paris of eyes judging his life. The relentless ticking of his pocket watch grounded him in the present, but his thoughts wandered again, trailing after the lingering echoes of his past. He had come a long way, through twists and turns, navigating the murky waters of the beyonder world. It was a labyrinthine journey, filled with countless dangers, yet here he was, prepared to summon his companions from the gray fog once more. Suddenly, a voice broke through his reverie. "Congratulations, Miss Justice. You are a beyonder now." The words reverberated through the hall, and Klein's gaze shifted to Audrey Hall, her aura transformed, a serene and pure blend of colors reflecting her new status. He felt a sense of pride swell within him. She had achieved what many only dreamt of, and the weight of her potential brought a smile to his face. Audrey blinked at him, surprise flickering in her gem-like eyes. "You can tell straight away?" Klein chuckled softly, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Your transformation is evident. It's impressive." "Thank you, Mr. Fool, and thank you, Mr. Hanged Man." Her voice was steady, but a hint of exhilaration underlined her words, a reminder of their shared journey. Alger Wilson, seated nearby, nodded. "That was much faster than I thought," he admitted, his gaze flicking between the two of them, as if trying to decipher an unspoken connection. Klein tapped his glabella, his mind racing with questions, but one dominated his thoughts above all others. He leaned forward, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Lady Sir, have either of you found Roselle's diary?" The atmosphere shifted as their gazes met, and the weight of the moment hung heavily in the air. Klein could sense the unspoken tension, the shared understanding that this was not merely a quest for knowledge, but a step into the deeper mysteries that bound them all. Audrey's expression turned contemplative, her fingers brushing against the edge of the table as if to steady herself. "I've been searching," she began, her voice low and measured, "but the clues are elusive. Roselle's works are scattered, hidden beneath layers of time and secrecy." Alger interjected, a flicker of determination in his eyes. "Perhaps we're looking at it all wrong. Roselle was known for his cunning, but he also left breadcrumbs for those clever enough to follow. We should combine our findings." Klein nodded, appreciating the insight. The diary wasn't just a relic, it was a key to unlocking the truths of their world, perhaps even the mysteries of the gods they dabbled with. "We must ensure we interpret the symbols correctly. They could lead us to more than just information. They could lead us to power." With that, the three of them fell into a rhythm of discussion, their minds weaving together the threads of Roselle's legacy, the room alive with the promise of discovery. Each idea sparked another, and the air was thick with potential as they embarked on their shared quest into the unknown. Chapter 59, Roselle's Origins. Upon hearing the fool's question, Audrey did not immediately answer like in the past. Instead, she widened her crystalline eyes and glanced at the hanged man with a scrutinous attitude. Alger subconsciously subdued his body motions. After a few seconds of silence, he said, "I found 2 pages of Emperor Roselle's diary and have memorized their contents." "I have 1 page," Audrey, whose vision was obscured by the fog, said as though she was removed from the conversation. "Pretty good." Klein did not allow his joy or disappointment to be noticed in his voice. He felt joy as there were 3 full pages, but disappointment also because there were only 3 pages. Their initial search for the diary was definitely easier. All they had to do was ask through their connections and channels they were already familiar with. Collecting the pages would become more and more difficult as time went on, like trying to find a needle in a haystack while blindfolded. Should we express them now? Audrey inquired with a calm tone. Yes. Klein simply nodded. He maintained his posture without any change. He had to be cautious in front of a spectator. You know, just in case Alger decided to start floating or something. As he finished his sentence, pieces of yellowish-brown goatskin parchment and dark red fountain pens appeared in front of Audrey and Alger. The two of them picked up their pens and started to recall the symbols they had seen. They also infused the emotions of expressing them out, because nothing says mystical like pouring your feels into a piece of parchment. Silently, lines of text appeared on the goatskin. Some of them appeared proper, some delicate, others slanted, like my handwriting after 3 cups of coffee. In a mere minute, the contents that Alger and Audrey had forcibly memorized were all written. Klein willed the 3 pieces of parchment into his hands. He gave the pages a cursory glance and realized that some of the grammar was wrong. There were also missing and wrong words in the content. Classic. Can't get good help these days, even from a diary. He muttered to himself. But experimentation had proved that incorrect sequencing of words, to some extent, did not affect the overall comprehension of Chinese. Klein was also not afraid of missing words, since he often read web novels filled with censored asterisks. You know, the ones that make you wonder what on earth the author was actually trying to say. 8th April. I stood at the bow of Black King and stretched my arms, saying to Grimm and Edwards, "My fortune is yours for the taking, but you'll have to find it first. I left everything I own at the ends of the fog sea." They did not understand my humor at all, and even asked if I really had other treasures. How boring. You can't be my 4 horsemen of the apocalypse if you keep it that. April 11th. I discovered a nameless island that was not on a safe sea route. There are a good number of extraordinary animals there. No. I prefer calling them extraordinary beings. It feels more impressive that way. Other than that, there are several weird creatures on the island. I believe that if Darwin had been transmigrated there, there is no way he could have written his theory of evolution. April 15th. Grimm has suddenly become a little odd. Has he been infected by something? When did the Emperor Roselle, who was born in the Intis Kingdom, set off on a voyage? The Fog Sea should be the sea west of the Intis Republic. Yeah, I need to use historical information from the library to cross-reference this. Klein quickly finished reading a page, casting his gaze to the back of the piece of paper. At this point, he no longer hid the fact that he could decipher Emperor Roselle's secret symbols, since this ability fitted the persona and status of the fool. Audrey and Alger did not speak. They waited silently, as if unsurprised by such a revelation. In fact, they even believed that it was only right. October 2nd, they actually wanted me to marry Matilda from the Abel family without even consulting me first. Heavens, I have not even met her. No, I must decline. Even if I were to run away from home and survive on my own and suffer the vicissitudes of life, I must fight against this marriage. October 5th, Miss Matilda is really pretty. October 6th, her personality and her demeanor are just my type. I am starting to look forward to the marriage. Hey, Emperor, where is your integrity? Klein leaned back into his seat, not allowing his emotions to pass through the fog. It's like watching a rom-com where the guy falls in love with his arranged marriage. Total cliché. He realized that Gustav did not write in his diary every day early on. Most of the time, he would only write in the diary when there were certain events that he needed to lampoon, record, or to vent his emotions. He shifted his gaze downward. Klein looked at the last sentence of this page. October 9th. They actually called me the son of the steam. I like that very much. Klein was a little disappointed that the information in the first 2 pages was of little value. But he did not turn sullen. He moved the 3rd page to the top. This page had content written on both sides of the paper. May 21st. The Church of the God of Craftsmanship gave me 2 choices, 2 beginning sequence pathways. One of them is the Savant. It is a complete sequence pathway they possess. The other is Mystery Prior, which they obtained from the Moses ascetic order, but it lacks the higher sequences. May 22nd. My choice was easy. Savant. The Savant has a complete sequence pathway. Although wielding more information on mysticism can aid my return home, the problem is that if I am not strong enough, there is a need to acquire external help for transmigration. And I do not know if this external entity would be good or bad, benevolent or malicious. I cannot control it, and thus it could be very dangerous. In that case, why not strengthen myself and return by relying on my own powers? Thus, the complete sequence was the most important factor in my considerations. May 23rd. I have become a savant. With the power of the potion, I actually recalled all the knowledge I had learned in the past, such as physics, chemistry, etc. I have not only recalled the knowledge, but I understand it more deeply, as well as its possible applications and implications. Haha, this is a job specially tailored for a transmigrator like me from an alternate realm. Alger did not speak. Instead, he looked at the fool, as though waiting for him to give an answer. Klein rubbed his finger on the edge of the table and said in a relaxed tone, "Let me explain this with an analogy. Imagine the core powers of your potion as a tightly guarded castle. The remnants of the psyche that can cause a lashback reside within that castle. Our goal is to get rid of it and become the true master of the castle. There are two ways we can do that. The first is to forcefully invade the castle. There is no guarantee that this will work, and you will most definitely injure yourself unless you can suppress it with absolute power. But of course, we are not equipped to do that. The second way is to get the owner of the castle to extend an invitation. This invitation can allow us to slide through the scrutiny of the guards and infiltrate the castle. We can then easily finish off the enemies. But the problem lies in the fact that this invitation specifies the facial features and characteristics of the guest. Thus, we have to disguise ourselves and act as the guest. Do you understand?" Alger immediately asked, as if he had anticipated this reply. "Then the aforementioned invitation is the name of the potion sequence?" "That's right," Klein answered with great affirmation. Audrey froze for a moment, having the sudden feeling that she completely understood what acting meant. She immediately exited her spectator state due to her excitement. She praised in joy. "What an exceptional method, I think it fits your title. Its style is very compatible with the Fool. I would never have believed that acting would have such an effect. Luckily, I have been acting as a spectator the past few days." She paused for a moment before saying, "I think that this is a very valuable answer. My heart is not at ease accepting it for nothing. Mr. Fool, what do you need in exchange? Of course, I still remember that I owe you a page of Emperor Roselle's diary." "More pages of Roselle's diary, or—" Klein paused for a moment. He had wanted to get information about the sequence regarding the seer, but felt that such a low-level request would ruin the mystical image of the Fool. Thus, he chose to give up on it and planned to ask them discreetly some other day. "I just advanced recently and have yet to completely digest the seer potion." He consoled himself and added on without expression, "Anything regarding the Antigonus family, even if I'm already aware of them myself." Alger remained silent for a few seconds. He looked at the top of the long bronze table for a moment before slowly opening his mouth. "Mr. Fool, I believe I can pay you back immediately with the information you requested just now." Chapter 60, Second Blasphemy Slate. No problem. Klein tried to maintain his unchanging deep tone, like a guy at a bar pretending he wasn't just dumped. He rested his left elbow on the armrest of his chair and supported his forehead slightly with his fingers, posing as though he was listening calmly. You know, the classic, "I'm totally paying attention" look. Alger deliberated over his words and said, "The Antigonus is an ancient family. Their history can be traced back to the Cataclysm epoch before the Fourth epoch and is related to the Second Blasphemy Slate." The Second Blasphemy Slate? There's a Second Blasphemy Slate? How many are there? A whole collection like Pokemon. Klein's pupils shrank, and he nearly changed his posture, feeling the weight of this revelation. According to what the Hanged Man and Justice have said previously, the Blasphemy Slate contained the profound mysteries of the 22 paths of the divine. There are 2 of such important items, or even more? It's like finding out there's a sequel to a movie you thought was a standalone. 22 paths of the divine, sequences and pathways. Could these two nouns mean the same thing? Every complete sequence pathway leads straight to the throne of the divine? Sounds like a cosmic highway with no speed limits. At that instant, the description of the second blasphemy slate gave Klein numerous thoughts. He believed that if not for the thick grayish-white fog concealing him, his emotional reaction would probably have been discovered by Miss Spectator. As for the words cataclysm epoch, he was no stranger to that term as a historian. It was the name of the third epoch. Talk about an era you wouldn't want to invite to dinner. After his recent revision, Klein even knew that the third epoch was separated into two eras, the glorious era and the cataclysm era. Kind of like a party that started off great and ended in chaos. A second blasphemy slate? Audrey plainly revealed her ignorance on the matter, looking like a kid who just learned about the existence of a second season of their favorite show. Before she calmed her emotions, she returned to her spectator state. Nice question. Klein secretly cheered for Miss Justice. It was a question inconvenient for him to ask as the fool. Alger stole a glance at the fool and noticed that his posture remained the same, nor did he make a sound. Hence, he thought and answered. The first blasphemy slate appeared in the Dark Epoch, which is the second epoch where we humans struggled to survive under the protection of gods. The second blasphemy slate appeared at the end of the third epoch. It could even be said that its appearance symbolized the end of the Cataclysm epoch. The content of the two blasphemy slates is kept secret by the 7 major churches. I only know bits and pieces of it. I only know that they involve the pathways to godhood, but I am not sure of the differences between them. Was the blasphemy slate that Emperor Roselle saw the first or the second? Audrey asked curiously, probably hoping for some juicy gossip. Upon hearing that, Klein recalled what Alger said about the potion names during the first gathering. He said that the names of the sequence potions were derived from the blasphemy slate. Similarly, Captain had also mentioned that the formation and completion of the potion system was thanks to the birth of the blasphemy slate. That indirectly confirms that the pathways to godhood are the sequence pathway. Klein answered his earlier question silently, thinking this was starting to sound like a soap opera. Then Alger simply replied, "The second one." The glint in Audrey's eyes diminished and she returned to her spectator state. She did not continue asking questions. Instead, all she did was focus her gaze on the hanged man. It was obvious that her scrutiny made Alger uncomfortable, but he suppressed the emotions within him. He lowered his voice and continued. During the Solomon dynasty in the fourth epoch, although the Antigonus family was considered an illustrious part of the aristocracy, they didn't do anything very memorable until they supported the establishment of the Tudor Empire. They then stood right in the middle of the stage of the northern continent. In that period, Antigonus, Ammon, Abraham, Jacob, and others were illustrious names of the human kingdom. However, after the War of the Four Sovereigns, the Blood Emperor from the Tudor Empire perished. They fell from the top of their pedestal and are now hunted by the 7 gods. I am not sure about the actual process, but I do know that the Antigonus family was destroyed at the hands of the Church of the Evernight Goddess. Mr. Fool, if you'd like to know more, I am afraid that you can only obtain the information from the Church of the Evernight Goddess or from the few ancient secret organizations. You know which few I am referring to. I don't. Klein nodded while feeling bitter inside. Okay. The secret order is 1. Captain and Old Neil mentioned the Moses Ascetic Order. I wonder if the psychology alchemists count. While he mentally checked off the candidates, Alger provided him with the last bits of information. I similarly have no idea which sequence pathways the Antigonus family held. There are only 2 adjectives that appear repetitively in the descriptions of the Antigonus family, and those are strange and terrifying. Strange and terrifying. Thinking back to the notebook, the original Klein and his classmates, and what happened to Ray Bieber's mother, it really is aptly worded. Klein continuously rapped the edge of the long table with the tip of his finger a couple of times, like he was trying to summon a genie or something. Then he slowly began to speak. Very well, I am satisfied with the payment. The reason he continuously rapped the long table lightly with his fingers was to emphasize the action, to make Justice and the Hanged Man believe that he had a habit of rapping in order to conceal the fact that the same motion was used to activate and deactivate his spirit vision. "It's my pleasure." Alger did not say anything else. Audrey took a look at the Hanged Man, and then the Fool. She smiled faintly and said, "Then, I shall ask the second question. What is the name of the subsequent potion for Spectator? Where can I find the clues?" I'd also like to ask so straightforwardly, but different choices lead to different difficulties. Klein did not speak, but cast his gaze towards the Hanged Man. Alger remained silent for a few seconds before saying, "I'll answer the question for free because I led you on this pathway." The subsequent sequence for Spectator is sequence 8, telepathic. He had yet to turn off his spirit vision, and he immediately saw that the Hanged Man was showing signs of nervousness, while Miss Justice was too simple-minded to show fear or carefulness. Before they could reply, Klein comforted them. "Don't worry, it's trivial. If it succeeds, it will be beneficial to you, so I wouldn't be paying extra remuneration. Go ahead." Audrey instinctively entered the spectator state, but she couldn't see through the thick gray fog engulfing the Fool. "As you will," Alger replied, steadying himself. Klein moved his fingers and smiled when he said, "Previously, I said that we would do some experiments to enable you to ask for a leave of absence. That way, you do not have to worry if you have to be somewhere inappropriate on a Monday afternoon. That's our wish." Audrey loosened her tightly knitted eyebrows. Alger thought and said, "What do you need us to do?" "You could try a piece of ritualistic magic during your free time. It need not be too formal, as long as you are in an environment that won't be disturbed. Put 4 brand new candles on an altar, placed on 4 corners respectively. It's best if they are candles with a sandalwood scent. Put a loaf of white bread near the candle on the top left corner. A bowl of Fainapotter noodles near the candle on the top right corner. Paya by the candle on the bottom left corner, and a desi pie by the candle on the bottom right corner. Use a silver knife to make a sealed spiritual environment." Klein described his modified version of the luck enhancement ritual and taught Miss Justice how to create a spiritual environment for free. To be frank, as the ritual was targeted at himself, Klein believed that the former part, which was intended to attract the interest of an entity, could be omitted completely. However, he still worked hard to make the procedure seem important. Of course, it didn't comply with what old Neil taught about gods being second and oneself being third. Mix moonflowers, gold mint, slumber flowers, fingered citron, and rock rose together, then distill it. Extract it for its essential oil, then pour a drop onto each candle. Audrey listened with piqued interest as she recorded all that he said. When he was done, she asked, "What about the incantation?" "Mr. Fool, what's the corresponding incantation?" Alger stopped writing with the fountain pen in his hand as well. He turned his head to look at the Fool. Klein, who was immersed in the gray fog, tapped the edge of the long table with his finger lightly and said calmly and monotonously in Hermes, "The Fool that doesn't belong to this era. You are the mysterious ruler above the gray fog. You are the king of yellow and black who wields good luck."